Hi AP Psychology students and welcome back. Today we are continuing with our Thinking and Intelligence unit but shifting away from thinking and into the topic of intelligence. This aligns with College Board topic 2.8 which is explain how modern and historical theories describe intelligence. It also is connected to explaining how intelligence is measured. And we're going to answer this through three essential questions. So the first one is, how is intelligence measured? Second, what are the principles of a good test? And then third, how does environment and bias impact intelligence scores? So when we think about theories of intelligence, really there's just two kind of ways of thinking about it. So the first is that intelligence is one ability, right? It is a general ability. It is characterized by that little g, and if you're good in one area, you tend to score high in all other areas. The opposite of that is that intelligence is multiple abilities. So there is this triarchic theory that intelligence is classified into three areas: analytical, creative, and practical. And then there is an even wider theory, multiple intelligence theory, and that says it's 8 different independent intelligences. Things like mathematical, kinesthetic, verbal, interpersonal, all different areas. And there's some, obviously, debate about which of these is true. Are the multiple intelligences really talents and not intelligences? And there isn't one right answer, but there's just different ways of looking at the idea of intelligence overall. So where did IQ testing come from? So IQ testing was first developed in the early 1900s by a Frenchman named Alfred Binet, and it was originally developed because a bunch of students were now attending school. They were, starting compulsory schooling in France, and so they needed to figure out a way of how to identify kids who had like special learning needs or needed extra help, like basically how to sort kids kind of into grades. So he developed this test, and he developed with the test the idea of an IQ score. So kids who took this test, basically they were given an exam that kids of their age should be able to answer. And the way that they got a score was that if their mental age, so like, if they could answer things that other 10-year-olds could answer, their mental age was 10, versus their chronological age times 100. So let's say a 12-year-old took the test and could answer questions that a 12-year-old should be able to answer. That would give them a score of 100, which would be average. Let's say a 12-year-old took the test but could only answer questions that a 10-year-old could answer, right? Then they would score below 100 at an 83. Maybe that would identify them for needing special help. And the opposite of that, if a 10-year-old was able to answer, if a 10-year-old chronologically was able to answer questions that a 12-year-old should answer mentally, they get a score of above 100, giving them kind of like that gifted or a kind of exceptional IQ score. So this was the original measure of IQ. It's where the IQ score came from. It's how we got 100, all of these things. However, there's a problem with it. As you get older and older, your chronological age keeps going up, but your mental age kind of flattens. And so we got rid of this as our IQ score, and now we use an equal distribution and a normal curve and a standardized scale, so that when you get your score, it's compared against others who already took the test and put in the correct percentile. So the average score now is 100, and that kind of is renormed as it's necessary based on different groups of people. Now, intelligence testing spread after this original test, and in the United States, it was used for really some not so great purposes, right? So it was used to limit access to certain careers or statuses. It was given to Army recruits for World War I to determine if they were eligible to fight or what their job would be. It was used for immigration, saying people, certain immigrant groups that scored low shouldn't be allowed in the U.S., or different jobs they wouldn't allowed to have. It eventually was connected with the eugenics movement, which was trying to kind of create this perfect, race, which also led to more kind of racist or anti-immigrant policies, because different populations would score differently on the test because of different educational, or different language issues or cultural issues. The test really wasn't built for all immigrant and, different populations to take it. Currently, though, intelligence testing is really mostly used for identifying students who need special services in schools. So, for special needs, or even if you wanted to go to a gifted program or an accelerated math program, that kind of thing in elementary school, they might give you an IQ test. So no matter what the test is, especially an IQ test, but any psychological test, so we're measuring depression, we're measuring anxiety, we're measuring personality, we're measuring IQ, it should follow 3 principles. So the test needs to be standardized, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be valid. So let's talk about each of those. So with standardization, the idea is that every single time the test is administered, it's administered in the exact same way. Same instructions, same time, same environment, same materials, same scoring. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to compare scores over time with different groups of people. So you give the test to a group, you kind of lay their scores out on a normal distribution where the average score becomes 100, and then new people take it and you compare the new people to the old people and give them a score, right? So this allows us to create a normal distribution because we keep giving the same exact procedure each time. All right, next is reliability. So reliability is also known as consistency. So this is that the test gives you the same results each time it's taken. There's 2 ways you can measure this. So the first is test retest. So you take a test the first time and then you take it a second time and you should get around the same score. Doesn't need to be exactly the same, but within a range. The other way to test reliability or consistency is to take all the questions of the test and split them up and to see if the test is equally as hard on both sides. So like if people do about as similar or if the questions are about as same or ask similar things on either side of the test. For validity, the idea here is that it's about accuracy. So does the test measure what it's designed to measure? Okay, and there's 2 different ways to look at this as well. So there's construct validity. Construct validity is basically, does the test actually ask questions that help get to what the test is supposed to get to? So in this example I have, a good construction validity of a depression test would have questions that are like, how often do you feel sad? Do you have trouble sleeping? You know, questions that relate specifically to depression and mood. A poor construction validity test would be like, what's your favorite color? Do you prefer summer or winter? Do you like rain? Right? Like these questions, while they're asking about how people feel, they're not getting at kind of any of the symptoms of depression, right? So that would be positive or like good versus bad construct validity. The other kind of validity that we can look at is predictive validity. So this is that if the test that you're taking currently can predict a future ability, right? And so one of the examples of this is that like SAT scores can predict future college GPA to a certain degree. I think the last time I looked at it, it was that high SAT scores determines your grades or like leads to high grades for the first semester of college, and then after that high school GPA tends to speak more to how you do in college, but it does predict success there. This little graphic I think is a nice job of showing how reliability and validity are separate and related. So in this first one here, right, we have reliability only. So you shoot it and it's in the exact consistent place. Then the middle one, you've got reliability and validity. So it's consistent and accurate in that it hits the target. The last one, it's unreliable. So it's inconsistent and it's invalid. So a test can be reliable and not valid. But if it's unreliable, it's automatically invalid. Okay, so now to some issues with testing. So IQ scores can be very helpful. They can give us information about people, help us judge differences. However, it's really important when we're thinking about IQ tests that we don't make judgments about individual people based on differences we see across groups. So what do I mean by this? So when we look at IQ testing, over time we've seen gender differences and racial or ethnic differences. So for example, women tend to score lower on certain types of mathematical or spatial reasoning parts of IQ tests. Also, we have both African American and Mexican American immigrants, or not immigrants, but Americans tend to score lower on IQ tests, right? And so then that very easily for people becomes like, oh, women or minorities are genetically inferior. And that's not true. That's not the case, right? Actually, what it is that IQ tests tell you about the inequities in your society. And all over the world, groups that are marginalized in a culture, right, they do worse on IQ tests. They have lower scores on IQ tests because that marginalized group is impacted by poverty, discrimination, educational inequalities, and all of these things bring down their scores or negatively impact the scores, right? The tests just highlight what inequalities or cultural differences, right? If you think about the United States, like okay, so we had like, how long did we have like Jim Crow laws or segregation rules, or even like kind of like hidden rules about where African Americans were allowed to live or buy houses, or schools they could attend, or that kind of thing. And so that impacts the ability for them to gain access to equal education and different like nutrition and all this kind of stuff, healthcare, which then over time can impact the group as a whole. But it doesn't speak about every single individual, male or female, or different racial, ethnic backgrounds. Another issue with testing is that the test taker's expectations can impact the test. So what they find is that there's something called stereotype threat, and this is when increased anxiety because you're afraid of confirming the stereotype makes you do worse. So if I'm a female and I'm like, okay, the stereotype is that girls aren't good at math. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like this person next to me thinks that I'm gonna do poorly because I'm a girl and I'm bad at math. And then I like stress myself out so much that the stress like basically gets rid of my mental resources, like it uses up all my energy, and then I do poorly because of it. There's also something called stereotype lift, and this is where if you feel like your group has like a positive stereotype, it can actually make you perform better than if you didn't know about the positive stereotype. So if you take a look at this, when African American and white males are made aware of the stereotypes, white males do significantly better. However, when the stereotype threat is removed, not only do African American males increase significantly, but white males also drop. Right? So stereotype threat and stereotype lift. Another issue with testing is that IQ scores have been increasing over generations. That must mean that we're getting better nutrition, better medical care, better access to education, better technology. But it just shows that intelligence has to do with the environment. Because if intelligence was really just genetic, it wouldn't be improving significantly over generations. And then last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about academic achievement. So IQ scores are not the same as academic ability, right? They can speak to parts of what you might be good at academically, but they're not the same. So academic ability is usually measured in two different ways. Achievement test, so how much you learned, like an AP test or finals, and an aptitude test, which measures your ability to learn, right? An example of this I have over here on the side with numerical reasoning. So, you have to, like a company or a school who's testing your ability to think mathematically, maybe you want to be an accountant or you want to go into engineering, might give you this kind of a test, and you have to figure out what goes here from this option. And it speaks to your ability to reason numbers, but it isn't anything that you've directly, specifically learned and how much you've learned. All right, AP Psychos. So today we talked about how do you measure intelligence, what makes a good test, and how does environment and bias impact scores. So make sure you can answer these essential questions before you stop the video. That's all for now. And remember, psychology is flippin' awesome.